Hello, Don. It's great to have you here at the Elderly Instruments Living Room Sessions. We're recording this a week or so in advance, so I hope you enjoyed your first set, and folks should stick around for the second one. Our intermission here will be around 10 or 12 minutes, something like that. I wanted to get right to it since we don't have a lot of time. It occurs to me that although I'm sure there's a lot of tenor banjo players watching this, I would expect there's also a lot of more traditional elderly customers, which is to say, a lot of five-string banjo players. And so I've talked to a lot of five-string banjo players who really want to learn tenor banjo, but often don't really have a way to do that. And I'm wondering if you have briefly some suggestions as to who to listen to, the old guys, the new guys, who to listen to, and maybe how to go about it.
Oh, how to go about learning tenor?
Yeah, I know you did it. You did it a different way than most, probably.
Yeah, I did. I came at it from as being a bass player, and
Right.
I still love playing bass. But a bass, and then I played guitar. So really, I came at it from the guitar standpoint, because when I first started tenor, I tuned it like the top four of the guitar, and some people call that Chicago tuning.
Right.
And you can do that Chicago tuning with a tenor banjo or a plectrum banjo or a five-string if you just don't use the fifth string. You can do that. But then I got hold of a six-string banjo, a guitar banjo, and I thought, well, I'm going to tune this one tenor and figure it out. And it actually, I don't want to say easier, but it's because each string is the same distance from each other. They're in fifths, as a bass would be in fourths. There's a certain uniformity to finding your harmonies and your chords. Like, a major third will always be the same distance, on each string. Sure. In this case, a minor sixth, because it's turned over. It's spaced out.
Yeah.
I would say, I used to listen to, Danny Barker played a six-string banjo. So, but then there was, I worked in the band with Narvin Kimball. He basically played rhythm all the time. He did some chord things. Mm-hmm. By the way, he was a bass player at one point.
Oh, okay.
Some of my people I really dug were like Ike Robinson. Mm-hmm. He was with Jabo Smith's band early on in the quartet stuff. They were in competition. The label put them in competition with Louis Armstrong's Hot Five. So that was their answer to that.
Sure.
If you can find anything by George Gano.
How do you spell that?
He was a New Orleans player, Guenos.
Something like that. Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Because Gano's spelled some different ways, but.
And what era is he from?
He's from, I would say, the 40s, 50s in New Orleans. I don't know if there's a whole lot. He's probably on some recordings.
Yeah.
But I remember he had a comment where he quit playing because he was tired of playing with people that couldn't play that well. I think he was at Preservation Hall at the time, and I'm not saying that anything bad about them.
No.
I'm just saying he showed his frustrations by saying that. So maybe it was just in terms of local gigs and people calling, and if you work and you need to work, you end up taking gigs with whoever calls you. And,
sure.
And you don't do like me. I don't burn bridges. I blow them up. So I've
okay, we'll leave now.
Yeah, I don't recommend my method. But people like that, Harry Reeser.
Sure.
Listen, I learned not so much that Harry Reeser, he didn't really swing, so to speak. He had his own way of playing, and it's just the stuff he played, the novelty tunes he did, was such great exercises to learn them. The single note playing, if you're into that. And but that's kind of the people I checked out.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I guess there really are two schools. There are people who almost always just play rhythm, in Dixie stuff usually, and then there's people like you who take leads and have more of a freer jazz approach, I guess. I don't know. What would you call it?
Yeah, well, I think the tenor banjo was sort of relegated to a rhythm instrument when it's kind of like the bass in bluegrass. There's one there, and whoever comes in last has to play bass.
Often the case.
So maybe in I don't know if that's true or not, but for me, just to play bump, dump, jump, jump, jump just was boring.
Yeah, sure.
And it was my wife Millie, who would listen to all these different kinds of music because she's a researcher. So when she'd hear me play with my polyrhythmic type ding, gang, gang, ding, bang, bang, and the rolls, I was almost playing like a drummer.
Yeah.
And but she noticed that I play very similar to a Haitian banjo player or Caribbean player.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually makes a lot of sense when you think about the people in Haiti who came here after the revolution. Mm-hmm. Before it was Haiti, it was Santo Domingo, or the name, and it became Haiti after. But those people all settled on the Gulf Coast here in Louisiana.
Sure.
Kid Ory sang with a Haitian dialect. So it made sense that I played like that.
Yeah,
and I
sure.
think most of the banjo players here, I think, just said, okay, this is the part I have to play. And I came into it from more of a cultural standpoint, in that my family all played music. Papa John Joseph back at the beginning with Buddy Bolden and all that. And even though neither of my parents played music, my mother was always listening to stuff, and I was exposed to a lot of things. So I think it's sort of a cultural thing, the way I play.
Sure. No, that sounds good. This brings up two questions that I have. One is, it's maybe I'm hoping this is a fairly quick answer, but I'm wondering how the local music in New Orleans has changed since Katrina. I mean, I'm sure there's been an effect. I know there, a lot of things have changed. A lot of things are the same, but have we lost a lot?
Well, the short answer is a lot of local people who were here left.
Yeah.
Some of those weren't full-time musicians, because a lot of the musicians, even back then, were plasterers, and they were journeymen. They did things. They built things, bricklayers, and they played music at night.
Sure.
But now there's a lot of people who have moved here. And I mean, honestly, I don't really recognize a lot of the bands.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know who they are now, but initially I'd like, who's this? And they're, in a way, there was a repertoire that used to happen here, but now it's more wide open. I mean, I hear a lot of songs that I'd never heard bands play that were recordings, like classic recordings of things. And the bands here mostly played because they had a purpose, they had a social function, and function in society. They played for dances, they played for second lines, they played for funerals. So that repertoire is now, that whole purpose is convoluted. You see second lines now because a wedding party hired one.
Yeah, sure. So are you still hearing, is there still the same, there's always all kinds of music in every town.
Yeah.
But are you hearing more or less of the traditional New Orleans jazz kind of stuff, or about the same?
It started dying down. Bourbon Street's always been fickle. So in terms of New Orleans jazz, you have Palm Court Cafe, you have Preservation Hall, and if the Maison Bourbon reopens, it'll probably have New Orleans jazz, but there's most of the places have become like karaoke, and most of the bands you see are playing for private parties, or maybe on the riverboat, or maybe in the street for tips.
Yeah. So are there fewer bands then to take these sort of I don't know if they're more lucrative, but they're better gigs from a standpoint maybe than working in a bar somewhere?
Well, yeah, there's still some bands. I mean, Dr. Michael White still does his thing. He records with the local record label down here, and I still do mine. My Blue Book of Storyville has done great.
Great
in terms of reviews. I got reviews all over the world, and I can't tour. First album, I can't tour.
Yeah, right.
But in that sense, yes. But like I can remember my growing up, people just have parties and say, "Oh yeah, can you play?" And you'd end up working a lot. I think there's another place. Quarter Two Sisters used to have a brunch band all day. And I had a regular brunch on Sundays, but we'd play some New Orleans jazz, but we'd mix it up.
Yeah, sure.
The crowd is different now.
Well, it's always a tourist crowd. At least in some of those places, it's always a tourist crowd. And although they're there maybe for New Orleans music, maybe they're more comfortable with something else. It's just good to give them a little bit of everything, kind of like a wedding band, I guess.
Yeah,
in that sense.
You got to read the crowd. So
yeah, sure. So another question in that vein. I know you've had your own bands. You have your own band now. When it can tour, when it can finally play together again, but you've also played as a sideman for a lot of people, I'm sure. And do you have a preference? I mean, you're more in control if you're the band leader, of course, but
sure.
There's probably less work involved if you're a sideman.
I think in terms of touring, I do a lot of touring as a guest artist. And I like that at this point in my life, because I can bring my wife with me and we go, in fact, before this, we spent 6 weeks in Europe, and we just fly over, rent a car, go hang with friends for a bit, then I drive to the gigs.
Play with the local band.
Play with a band in Denmark. I played with a band in Germany. Nice. And the group that I recorded, Blue Book of Storyville, they're in Europe too. I mean, 2 of the guys are in England and 1 is in France.
Okay.
So
cool. That sounds maybe like an ideal situation in some ways, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I love playing with Jazz at Lincoln Center with that band. I mean,
sure, of course,
such a high level of musicianship.
Yeah. How often does that happen? Man. How often do you go to New York for that?
Well, not so.
In normal times.
Twice last year I went.
Okay, all right.
And then before that, I think I was on the Eric Clapton thing, but it ends up being once a year, maybe once or 3 times every 2 years. It slowed down. I used to go a lot.
Sure.
But they're doing a lot more, and they're evolving as well. And everybody in the band is encouraged to write, so they've evolved.
Indeed. And so let me change, do a right-hand turn here, or I don't know which direction I'm going in here, but let me ask about your banjos. I mean, I know. I see some of your. We should mention maybe you'll mention it during the concert that about if you're still doing the daily, twice a day, Don Vappie coffee with Don in the morning, and Don pulling things out of his head in the afternoon. So it looks like to me, which is great. I think it's I find it very entertaining. But so assuming you're still doing that. I see you've been playing your open back ohm banjo, right? And is that like a main banjo, or is that a touring banjo? Is that a home banjo?
That's my main banjo. I like it because it has a darker sound. It's Juniper, I think, is the model.
Okay.
It's maybe a couple of things a little different. I did request the guitar tuners.
Yeah.
And the reason is I have a double case for a guitar and the banjo, and the tuners coming out the back push against, and it fits like this.
Yeah, you don't need that, right?
And you know, Chuck told me as an added benefit that it's actually a higher ratio.
Well, that's right. They're actually better tuners in some sense. So
I'm okay.
Well, you can probably tune it either way, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a preference thing, but it doesn't bother me. So.
Is that a 12-inch head or an 11-inch head? You know?
Oh, I think it's 11. Yeah.
Okay.
It's smaller.
I was thinking that a 12 might give you a bassier sound that you know, the bridge would go a little more forward.
And that's the bass player in me. I don't want a real deep sound. I want a darker sound, but with clarity.
Sure.
So the smaller head, just like with my amplifier, I like the super reverb with the old Fenders. They had the 10-inch speaker can still get the low end, but it's more clear.
Sure.
So
okay.
Yeah, that
sounds great. And you don't, you know, I take it you don't feel a need for. I mean, one often wonders why the banjo needs a resonator. You know, seems like for volume, and it'll change the tone a little, but I assume you don't feel a need for the extra volume wherever you're playing. You've always got mics in case your banjo is the quietest instrument on the stage.
Yeah, you know,
which seems unlikely.
I actually invested in a microphone for that reason. This is a Earthworks PC30.
Okay.
P30C. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I bring it with me.
Sure.
And I got the dark color one. They make them in white and black. I got the black one to be not so conspicuous. But it's a great mic, and it works great for guitar. Works great for banjo.
It's just what you need.
Yeah, and
sounds like and it's also small and lightweight. So
yeah, you should bring your mic with you if that's what you want. Seems
like a wise idea. Well, we're kind of running out of time, but I have one other question, which is as a 4-string player, have you ever fooled around much with the ukulele? And let me tell you why I ask that is because, as you probably have noticed in the world, all of a sudden ukes are I mean, I run a music store, and I know ukes are one of the best-selling instruments we have these days. Usually they're very cheap ones, but that's ukuleles. It's hard to make a really expensive one. So, but have you fooled around with the uke?
I haven't. I have, to the point that I had 2 students who started on ukuleles.
Okay.
So I looked at it and worked out ways of playing scales and stuff.
Yeah.
And because they can get a book and learn chords but I figured that out. In fact, I have a 5-string player that's enrolled in the jazz program at the Jazz and Heritage School. So I took my own Monarch banjo with the resonator on it, and I tuned it to the G, D, G, B, D. I don't have the drone string, the high G. But I did that so I could work out some chords and progressions for her to play.
Yeah, well, great. So, I only asked because I'm assuming it would be an easy switch for you if for some reason banjos didn't exist anymore, and you wanted to play the ukulele, it wouldn't be a big struggle for you.
Well, I always think of Tiny Tim, man.
Yeah, well, Tiny Tim, he in his oim way, he wasn't bad. He actually. He brought a lot of good music to the fore, but
my age,
But they say that Tiny Tim killed the ukulele at the time. Although when he came on the scene, there was no scene at all for the ukulele, so he couldn't have really killed it. Anyway, I think we should probably get going. It's time for you to start up your concert again in the living room sessions, and so I thank you so much. It's great talking to you and great to see you, and maybe I'll join you for coffee one morning.
Yeah, sometimes I wear my Midwest banjo shirt. I
haven't seen that. I haven't seen that.
I've worn it. And
I'm wearing mine right now. Here, let me show it to the people. There it is. I think that shows it. There it is. That's an old one.
That's an old one. I got
I'll let you go.
Superheroes on it.
Indeed. Well, great talking to you.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.